Snow fell in slow, endless spirals, like the sky had grown weary of keeping its own tears. The small train station sat at the edge of the valley, lanterns flickering against the wind, each glow a trembling heartbeat in the white dark. The last train had gone 2 hours ago, and what it left behind was not just silence, but a girl. She slept curled on a wooden bench, arms around herself, her dress thin and gray, the hem stiff with frost. A carpetbag lay beneath her head, half open, holding little more than a worn shawl and a broken comb. Every now and then her body jerked in her sleep, as if she dreamed of running. The station door rattled in the wind, and a few flakes drifted in, settling on her dark lashes. Outside, hoofbeats echoed faintly across the snow-packed road. A horse's breath steamed in the cold, followed by the heavy sound of boots crunching. A tall figure appeared in the storm, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a rawhide coat darkened by melting snow. He moved with the careful stillness of a man used to being watched. The lantern's light caught the copper edge of his skin, and the black braid falling down his back. Talon Greyhawk paused at the doorway, brushing snow from his shoulders. The wind hissed around him as he stepped inside, closing it behind him. His eyes adjusted to the dim yellow light. He saw her, small, asleep, lips pale as paper. For a moment, he thought she might already be gone. He set down his hat, knelt beside her, and felt for breath. The air left his chest in relief when her shoulders rose. He stood again, slow and quiet, then went to the stove in the corner, coaxing a weak flame back to life. When the wood caught, warmth began to whisper through the room. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, wide, the color of winter river water. Seeing him, she gasped and scrambled back until her shoulders hit the wall. "Don't take me back," she rasped. Talon didn't move. He raised one hand slightly, not to reach, but to still her fear. "No one's taking you anywhere," he said, his voice low, deep as distant thunder. "You're cold. That's all that needs fixin'." Her breathing came in quick, shallow waves. The firelight caught the raw, red skin around her wrists, where rope had bitten. He looked away to give her dignity, and pulled his coat from the chair, draping it on the bench beside her. "I don't need your pity," she whispered, though her hands trembled when she drew the coat around her shoulders. Talon didn't answer. He poured water into a tin cup, held it near the fire until steam rose, then offered it to her. She hesitated, but the smell of warmth was too much to resist. She took it, sipped, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Outside, the storm groaned against the glass. The station lantern swung gently, throwing arcs of light across her face. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, she was beautiful in a quiet, human way, like something fragile that had refused to die. He broke the silence again. "Train won't come till morning." "I missed it," she said softly. "They left me." "Family?" She shook her head. "Not mine. I was traveling with people who promised me work. When I couldn't pay what they wanted, they said I wasn't worth feedin'." The words hung heavy between them. Talon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He stirred the fire, letting the sparks rise. For a while, there was only the sound of snow against the windows, and the soft crackle of wood. She watched him, how he moved, steady, unhurried, as if no one could rush him from his own rhythm. Something in that steadiness loosened the knot in her chest. When she finally spoke again, her voice was thin but less afraid. "You're Apache." He nodded. "And you're freezing." A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Wry, broken, but real. "Do you always talk like that?" He looked up from the fire. "Like what?" "Like you don't owe the world any words." Talon's eyes held hers for a long moment. "Maybe the world already said enough." Her smile faded. "Mine sure did." She looked toward the window, where the storm erased everything beyond the glass. "I used to think if I kept quiet, things would stay gentle. But quiet just made me disappear." He studied her for a heartbeat, then reached into his satchel and took out a piece of cornbread, setting it on the small table near her. "Eat. You can vanish later if you still want to." She blinked at him, torn between pride and hunger. Then, wordlessly, she took a bite. The bread was dry, but her eyes filled again. "I don't even know your name." Talon. She nodded. I'm Evelyn. Her voice trembled on the name, as if she hadn't said it in a long time. He leaned back in the chair, arms folded, watching the fire. Rest, Evelyn. When the storm clears, I'll see you safe. She stared at him, unsure if safe was a promise or a kindness meant to pass the night. Either way, it warmed her. Minutes turned to an hour. She drifted in and out of half-sleep, and in one of those moments between waking and dreaming, she saw him sitting there still, eyes half-closed, as if guarding something sacred. The snow outside softened, the station creaked, and a strange peace settled in the room. When she woke again, dawn had not yet come. Talon stood at the window, watching the snowfall, his silhouette drawn sharp against the pale light. Something in her stirred, an ache that wasn't quite fear anymore. Talon, she said softly. He turned, and for a heartbeat their eyes met, his steady, hers uncertain, both carrying the same quiet loneliness. Outside, the wind dropped suddenly, leaving a silence so deep it felt like the world had paused to listen. In that silence, Evelyn whispered, "You don't have to stay." Talon's reply came low, almost lost in the wind's sigh. "You shouldn't be alone." And though she didn't yet know what it meant, or how far those words would reach, something inside her shifted. Like a door opening in a house she'd long forgotten she owned. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two strangers sat in its hush, the fire burning between them, and somewhere far down the tracks, a whistle cried through the night, calling them both toward a morning neither had expected. Snow still covered the world like a hush that wouldn't lift. Morning light broke in faint ribbons through the cracks of the shuttered station, turning frost into gold dust. Evelyn woke slowly, the weight of Talon's coat still around her shoulders. Her throat burned, her fingers stiff, but for the first time in weeks she wasn't shaking. He was gone. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Then she saw him outside, a dark figure against the endless white. He was leading his horse through the snow, checking the path beyond the station. When he came back, his hair was dusted with frost, his breath steaming in the cold. "You're awake," he said quietly. She nodded, pulling the coat tighter. "I thought you'd left." Talon shook his head once. "The storm's passed, but the road's bad. Train won't run till tomorrow. You'll freeze if you stay here." Evelyn looked around the station, at the broken stove and the cracks in the floorboards where the wind whistled through. Her pride made her want to refuse him, but pride had brought her here, starving, half dead on a bench. "Where would I go?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. He set down his pack, poured water into the dented kettle, and said finally, "There's a cabin north of the ridge. Mine. You can rest there till the train runs." Her lips parted, as if to protest, but nothing came. There was something in his voice that wasn't pity. It was steadiness, the kind that made her feel like she might still belong to the living. "I don't know if I can walk that far," she murmured. "Then ride," he said simply, offering his hand. The road out of the valley wound through drifts that reached the horse's knees. The world was white silence, broken only by the creak of leather and the slow rhythm of hooves. Evelyn sat in front of him on the saddle, the warmth of his coat around them both. She could feel his heartbeat against her back. Slow, sure, unbothered by the cold. When they reached the ridge, the land opened wide. Below lay a frozen river, glinting under the pale sun, and beyond it, a cabin built of cedar logs. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin, stubborn line. He dismounted, helped her down. Her legs trembled when her boots touched the snow. He caught her elbow lightly, just enough to steady her, not enough to shame her. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and pine sap. The hearth still held the ghost of a fire. He moved quietly, as if his presence might startle the walls. Evelyn stood near the door, feeling like a trespasser in another life. "There's stew," he said, lifting the lid from a pot. "Wasn't expectin' company, but it'll do." She hesitated before sitting. The stew was thick and earthy, the first real food she'd tasted in days. Each bite felt like it filled something hollow that had lived inside her too long. When she finished, she set the bowl down and said softly, "You didn't have to bring me here." He leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Didn't have to. But it's cold out there." Her eyes lifted to meet his. People don't usually do things for me. Talon's gaze was unreadable. Maybe they didn't look close enough. The words sat between them like a small flame. She turned away first, embarrassed by how much warmth they carried. Days passed. The snow deepened outside, and the sound of the wind became part of their silence. Evelyn helped where she could, washing dishes, sweeping, patching an old tear in his coat. He said little, but his eyes followed her, steady and calm, as though he was memorizing her movements. Sometimes she caught him working outside, splitting wood or mending the corral. His strength seemed quiet, purposeful, built from years of carrying things alone. She wondered what had sent him to live out here, away from everyone. She asked once, "Don't you get lonely?" He paused, axe halfway through the log. "Lonely's just quiet when there's no one to share it with." "And you don't mind it?" He met her eyes. "It minds me sometimes. But I learned to listen." That night, she dreamed of her old life. A boarding house, a man who promised marriage, a contract she couldn't read, and then the long road west. When she woke, the sound of the wind seemed almost like laughter. She pressed her face into the blanket to keep from crying. Talon was sitting by the hearth when she came out, feeding another log to the fire. He didn't look up, but said quietly, "You don't have to tell me. Some stories are better carried than spoken." Her breath hitched. She wanted to ask how he knew, but his tone made it clear he'd carried stories too. By afternoon, sunlight broke through the gray, spilling across the valley like a promise. She took his coat and stepped outside, needing air. The cold bit at her cheeks, but the sky felt whiter than she remembered. Down the hill, she saw smoke in the distance, too much for a chimney. When Talon came out beside her, she said, "Someone else out there?" He squinted, the line of his jaw tightening. "Town? You mean they're coming here?" "Maybe," he said, eyes narrowing. "They talk. Always do." Her stomach sank. "About you? About both of us now." She understood. The world beyond this valley didn't forgive easily. A white woman and an Apache under one roof, the kind of story that would feed gossip for weeks. She felt her throat close. "I should go." "You can't," he said, quiet but firm. "Not in this weather. Not till you're strong." "Talon, they'll say." "Let them." His words hit like a hammer. He turned away, walked to the edge of the porch, looking out across the snow. The wind lifted the ends of his braid. She could feel the distance between them, and yet something in the air had changed. His defiance wasn't anger, it was protection. By evening, the wind returned. Evelyn sat near the fire, sewing the hem of a blanket. Talon's shadow moved past the window, feeding the horse. When he came back inside, the room filled with the smell of snow and pine. "You ever gonna take your own rest?" she asked. He smiled faintly, the smallest curve of his mouth. "Rest is for people who stop thinkin'." She laughed softly, surprised by the sound. "And what are you thinkin'?" "That you don't look as cold anymore." Her laughter faded. "You notice too much." "Someone's got to." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed with something tender and unspoken. She looked at his hands, the roughness of them, the scars, the life they'd known. She wondered what they'd feel like if they ever reached for her. Outside, the snow began again. Later that night, Evelyn stood at the window. Through the drifting flakes, she saw faint lanterns down the valley, moving lights, too many to be stars. A chill ran through her. "Talon," she called. He came quickly, his face shadowed by the firelight. One look, and he understood. The lanterns. The direction. "They're comin'," he said quietly. "For me?" He nodded once. Evelyn's breath shook. "What will you do?" Talon looked at her for a long moment, eyes steady, then reached for his coat. "What I have to." And as the wind rose and the light of approaching torches flickered on the horizon, Evelyn felt the warmth of the fire on her back, the cold of fear in her chest, and the weight of something she hadn't felt in years, being worth defending. Outside, the snow swallowed their footprints, and the night held its breath. The wind that night screamed like something alive, clawing at the shutters, scattering snow across the porch. Talon stood by the window, a silent figure against the shifting firelight, watching the flicker of distant torches move down the ridge. Evelyn sat near the hearth, her hands clenched in her lap, staring at the door as if the storm itself might burst through it. "They'll come here," she whispered. "You know they will." Talon didn't turn. "I know. They'll call me a liar. Say I ran off. Say you—" She couldn't finish. Her throat closed around the word. "They can say what they want," he replied, his voice low, steady, carrying that unshakable calm that both frightened and comforted her. "Words can't make a truth die." "But they can kill you," she said, rising. The sound of her skirt brushing the floor filled the room like wind against the rafters. "They'll hang you before sunrise if they think." Talon faced her then. The lamplight drew gold across the planes of his face, the hard angles softened by the quiet that lived in his eyes. "They think what they're told to think," he said. "I won't run from it." "Then I'll speak for you," Evelyn said quickly, desperate. "I'll tell them you saved me, that you never—" He shook his head once. "They don't hear women. And they don't hear me." Something inside her cracked at that, because it was true, and because it was unfair in a way that no voice could fix. She turned away, pressing her palm against her chest, as if she could still the ache there. He crossed the room, slow, deliberate, and set his hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was brief but grounding. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you don't owe me your fight. I've had mine long before you came." She turned then, meeting his gaze. "And did you ever win it?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, once. "For a while. But it cost too much." Her breath trembled. "Then maybe it's time someone stood beside you." The words hung between them, fragile as smoke. Outside, the torches drew closer, orange embers moving through the night like a slow-burning tide. Talon went to the table, checking the rifle leaning against the wall. His movements were methodical, unhurried, but she saw the tightness in his jaw. When he lit the lantern by the door, the room glowed with an amber warmth that fought against the cold. Evelyn watched him, her heart pounding. She'd known cruelty in many faces before, but never had she seen someone face it so quietly, without bitterness, as though endurance itself had become his form of prayer. She moved toward the window and peered through the frost. The figures on horseback were clearer now. 5, maybe 6. One of them carried the sheriff's badge that caught the firelight like a blade. "Let me talk to him first," she said. "Please." Talon shook his head. "They came for me. Not for talk." "Then they'll see you through my eyes," she said. "If I have to stand in front of them, I will." He looked at her long enough that the moment felt endless. "You shouldn't have to. Neither should you." For the first time since she'd met him, something flickered in his face. A quick, quiet break in the armor. It was gone before it could grow, but she'd seen it. A knock rattled the door. 3 hard strikes. The horse snorted outside, snow crunching beneath boots. Talon opened it. The wind rushed in first, carrying flakes that stung the air like glass. Sheriff Cole stood there, wrapped in his coat, hat low against the storm. Behind him were 2 deputies and the innkeeper, Martha Greeley, her cheeks red from cold and self-righteous fury. "Evenin', Greyhawk," the sheriff said. "Got a complaint from town." Talon didn't move aside. "You can say what you came to say from there." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You got a runaway woman in your cabin. Folks are worried." Evelyn stepped forward before she could think. "I wasn't taken. I was left. And if not for him, I'd be dead by now." The sheriff's gaze slid to her, sharp and disbelieving. "That true, ma'am? You stay in here by choice?" "Yes," she said, though her voice shook. "By choice." Martha's voice sliced through the wind. "That's no choice, Sheriff. Look at her. He's got her trapped. She don't know what she's sayin'. Evelyn flinched. Shame burned her throat. She looked to Talon, who hadn't moved, who stood calm and silent as stone. That calm gave her courage. "I know what I'm saying," she said louder. "He's done nothing wrong." The sheriff's jaw flexed. He wasn't sure which truth to trust, the one in her trembling or the one in the gossip he carried. Finally, he tipped his hat. "We'll talk in the morning," he said. Don't leave the valley. When they rode off, the torches dwindled until only the snow remained, swallowing their trail. Inside, Evelyn's hands were shaking so hard she could barely close the latch. "They'll come back," she said. "They'll bring more men." Talon poured water into the kettle again. "Then we'll have more coffee ready." She turned toward him, tears spilling. "You don't even care, do you?" He looked up from the fire, meeting her eyes with quiet weight. "I care," he said. "Just don't waste it on fear." Something inside her collapsed, not from defeat, but from recognition. All her life she had been told to fear, to shrink, to survive quietly. But standing there with the storm raging and the law turning its back, she realized that survival could also mean defiance. She crossed the room, knelt by the hearth, and began helping him tend the fire. He didn't stop her. They worked side by side, the air between them alive with something unspoken. After a while he said, almost to himself, "You ever think about what comes after all this?" She looked at him. "After what?" "After the world stops telling you who you are." Evelyn smiled faintly, a tired, honest thing. "Maybe then I'll start telling it back." He nodded once, and she thought she saw a trace of a smile in return. The hours passed in a hush. The snow outside eased, and the cabin filled with the sound of crackling wood. Evelyn dozed in the chair, the warmth lulling her into dreams she hadn't dared have in years, dreams of belonging, of peace, of hands that didn't harm. Near dawn, a faint sound stirred her awake. Hooves again. Voices. The clatter of metal. She rose, heart hammering. Talon was already standing by the door, rifle in hand, his silhouette framed by pale light. "They're back," she whispered. He nodded once, calm as the earth beneath them. "What will you do?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes found hers, steady, searching, full of something deeper than fear. "Whatever it takes to keep the promise," he said quietly. "What promise?" she asked, breath trembling. Talon's gaze held hers, the firelight flickering between them. "That you won't be alone again." Outside, a knock thundered through the frozen air, and the snow began to fall harder, thick and fast, as if the sky itself refused to see what would come next. The first knock at dawn sounded like the world holding its breath. A dull thud against the cabin door, sharp and deliberate, then silence, snow still whispering across the roof. Evelyn froze where she stood, her hands stilling above the fire. Her breath fogged in the air. Talon glanced toward her before setting the rifle gently on the table. "They came early," he said. His voice was calm, but she heard the weight beneath it. Outside, boots crunched against ice, muffled voices carried through the wind. Evelyn moved toward the window, peering through the frost. 4 riders this time, their horses stamping, breath white in the cold. The sheriff rode in front. Behind him, Martha Greeley clutched her shawl like a flag of virtue, her expression set in righteous fear. "They brought her again," Evelyn whispered. Talon adjusted his coat, his eyes on the door. "She's not here for truth. She's here to be seen telling it." The second knock was harder. Evelyn's heart kicked. Talon opened the door. Sheriff Cole stood in the threshold, his face lined with frost and something heavier, discomfort, maybe guilt. "Greyhawk," he said, "we need to settle this." "You already tried," Talon replied. "Didn't take." Cole's gaze slid past him, landing on Evelyn. "Ma'am, I'd ask you to step outside. We just need to talk." "No," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I'm not leaving." Martha's voice cracked like brittle wood. "You poor thing. You don't see it, do you? He's got you under some spell. That's what they do. Turn women soft, make you forget your place." Talon's expression didn't change. But his hands, Evelyn noticed, tightened slightly. "She's speaking for herself," he said. Cole sighed, tired, rubbing his gloved hands together. "Folks in town are stirred up. Sayin' this don't look right. You keep her here, they'll come with more than talk next time. I can't stop them all." Evelyn stepped closer, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "And what do you think it looks like, Sheriff?" He hesitated, glancing between them. "Like a man and a woman who'll get hurt if they keep standin' where they are." The words sank like stones. Talon looked out toward the horizon, where the snow was lifting in sheets of light. "Then let them come," he said quietly. "I'm not the one carrying hate." Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell the sheriff how this man had found her dying, had kept her alive without asking anything in return. But the air between them was already heavy with judgment. Cole tipped his hat, eyes softening. "I'll tell him to wait till sundown. After that—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The sound of hooves faded and silence returned, thick as snowfall. Evelyn turned toward Talon. "They'll kill you," she said. He began closing the shutters one by one, as though sealing off the world. "Not if they don't find me." "You're leaving?" Her voice cracked. He nodded toward the back door. "There's a path that cuts through the ravine. If I ride by night, I'll cross the ridge by morning." Evelyn stepped in front of him, trembling. "You can't run forever." Talon's eyes met hers. "I've been running since I was 15. Some habits don't break easy." Her tears burned. "And what about me? You saved me, you said I wasn't alone, and now you'll just vanish." He took a step closer, the space between them small and trembling. "If I stay, they'll hang me. And they'll call it law." Evelyn's hand found his sleeve. "Then let me be the one to speak. Let me show them you're not what they say." He shook his head. "They'll only see what fits their fear." The room felt smaller with every word. The fire snapped, shadows dancing over the walls. Evelyn could smell the cedar smoke, the wet wool of his coat, the faint leather of his gloves, everything she'd come to associate with safety. She turned away before her voice broke. "Then I'll go with you." Talon froze. "No. I have nothing left here," she said, her back to him. "Not a name worth keepin', not a place that's mine. If you go, I go." He stepped forward slowly, his breath visible in the cold. "The mountains ain't gentle, Evelyn. You'd freeze before sunrise. I'd rather freeze with you than burn here alone." He looked at her for a long time, so long that the fire's hum became the only sound between them. Then, quietly, he said, "You don't know what you're a-skinned." She turned. Her face was pale but resolute. "Maybe for once I do." A gust of wind struck the cabin, rattling the shutters like bones. Talon closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled. "All right," he said finally. "We'll leave by dusk." The afternoon stretched long and silent. Evelyn packed what little they had: bread, jerky, a canteen, his old blanket. Talon readied the horse, tightening the straps with practiced hands. Neither spoke much. Their silence carried more weight than words could. As the light waned, they stood on the porch, the snow tinted gold by the setting sun. The world was too still, as if holding back a storm. Talon helped her mount first, then swung up behind her. The heat of him at her back, the scent of smoke clinging to his hair, it steadied her trembling heart. The horse started forward, hooves muffled by the snow. They rode through the valley in silence. The wind had softened, carrying only the whisper of pine. The mountains loomed ahead, cold and infinite. Evelyn looked back once, the cabin shrinking, the chimney smoke fading into pale sky. "Will they follow?" she asked. "Maybe," Talon said. "But I know the land better." As night deepened, flakes began to fall again, thicker this time. The trail wound narrow and treacherous between ridges. Evelyn gripped the saddle horn, her body pressed against his. The rhythm of his breathing kept her calm. Halfway through the ravine, thunder rolled. Distant, wrong. It wasn't thunder. Gunfire cracked through the valley. Talon pulled the reins hard, turning the horse behind a fallen log. "Down," he whispered. Evelyn slid off, crouching low. The cold bit into her palms as she pressed into the snow. More shots echoed, warning, not aimless. Torches flickered on the ridge above. "They found us," she said, voice shaking. Talon's face was stone. "They followed the trail." She could see it then, the faint orange glow moving closer, the sound of men calling through the dark. The horse shifted restlessly. Talon ran a hand down its neck, whispering something soft in Apache, something Evelyn didn't understand but felt in her bones. When he turned to her, his eyes were steady. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens." She shook her head. "No, He caught her wrist, firm but gentle. "Promise me." Her breath hitched. "I promise." The men were closer now. Shadows against the snow. One shouted his name, another cursed. A bullet struck the tree beside them, splintering bark. Talon rose just enough to see over the log. "They won't stop," he murmured. "Then what?" He cut her off with a glance, calm and final. "You ride north when I tell you. Don't look back." Evelyn's heart seized. "I can't leave you." "You can," he said softly. "Because you must." Then he stood, firing a warning shot into the air. The echo rolled through the ravine, swallowed by wind and snow. Shouts answered, distant but closing in. "Go," he said. Evelyn hesitated only a moment before grabbing the reins and climbing onto the horse. Her tears froze as soon as they fell. Behind her, Talon moved like shadow and thunder, every step measured, his form half swallowed by the storm. Another shot rang, then another. She turned once, just once, and saw him framed against the torchlight. Tall, defiant, a single figure standing between her and a world that had never shown mercy. "Talon!" she cried. He looked back, just long enough for her to see his lips move through the chaos. "You'll never be alone again." Then the wind took him from her sight, and the night closed around everything.